Thank you so much, Meg. Thank you, PowerToFly, for facilitating this beautiful conversation. Ebony White, I'm just going to introduce you in just a few moments, but I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining, taking the time out of their busy schedules. The world's on fire. Things are broken. We're here to hopefully, ignite some conversation on how we can work to repair and, join forces. So thank you all for practicing emotional intelligence with us. I just want to set the stage there. So, I love that Megan highlighted empathy, active listening. So let's really put those skills to the test here in this next 30 minutes. It's going to fly by super quickly. So I just want to let our live callers also know that, at any point, if you want to share, a reflection or question, please drop that in the chat box so that I can raise that to our guest speaker. We would love to hear from you. Your voice needs to be heard. But otherwise, I will feed our speakers some questions you all have submitted offline just to keep the conversation rolling. And then I just want to invite folks to support the project that I'm working on that is called the Positive Force Team. If you go there and use the promo code Elevating Black Women, you'll get some network goodies. So just to kick us off with a great, exciting start, I just want to say thank you, Ebony White. Can you just take a few moments to introduce yourself? Let us know any fun facts you want to share to kick us off, and then let us know how we can support you once this conversation is over so that we can continue to support the great work you're doing.
Yes, thank you for having me, Mariella. Thank you for the rest of the PowerToFly team for adding me to this just awesome lineup of beautiful Black women. I definitely feel honored to be here. So, just to tell you just a little bit about myself, since you guys pretty much did my bio for me, I'll just say, I'm born Cali girl, raised in Kalamazoo, Michigan, currently living in the DMV area. Definitely come from a background where I know what it means to be low income. I know what it means to have to really rely on your family and support systems to be able to get by. And I know what it means to not even realize you don't got a lot of money because your mama made sure you had what you needed. So, I definitely bring a lot of my experiences in just the hurt that I see in our communities to the work that I'm doing on behalf of communities of color. And there's a lot of ways to be able to engage in a space. There's a lot of ways in which I would say everybody has a role to play. This is going to be a collective effort, and we have much work to do. The racial wealth divide that we're going to be talking about today is just a slice of the pie. There's a lot of economic inequities out here, and that's just something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm looking forward to this discussion with you all.
All right, so let's jump right into this. Oh, actually, did you say how we can connect with you offline?
Yeah, so you can connect to me. You can definitely go to Prosperity Now's website, which is prosperitynow.org. You can also connect with me through email, which is EYEWHITE@prosperitynow.org. Also, I'm also on LinkedIn too, so feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty responsive.
Awesome, great. Yes, well, you're doing so much beautiful work. So I just want to say thank you for the integrity there. Thank you for sharing your story. I also resonate with your story about, not knowing because your mom is, making sure that you're still, breathing and having a good time and seeing, at least the glass half full. So we need more stories to share in this space. Let's kick this conversation off by you letting us know a little bit more about the racial wealth divide in the United States. What is it? Who does it affect? And how can we be more aware of it?
Yeah, so the racial wealth divide, well, first, let's just start off by saying it affects everyone. We're all impacted by this. And so currently the median wealth for white households is 171,000. For Blacks, it's a little over 17,000, and that gap is growing. This is a 10 times difference that we have been seeing since the end of slavery. And when you're thinking about wealth is pretty much your savings and your assets, that's minus your liabilities or your debt. So when you're looking at savings and assets, you're looking at your car, your home, any other real estate you have, businesses, investments. Liabilities is pretty much debt, anything you owe. So student loans, which we know people have, credit card debt. And in the beginning, Black people, we were the wealth. We were worth a pretty penny, to be quite honest. And when you move forward, you have our labor as well as the land being torn from Indigenous and Native Americans, that really helped move white households forward in being able to create the wealth that they have today. We have people who have wealth, who they understand that wealth grows over time, right? And so it allows you to be able to pass it down and have that generational wealth, which is something that communities of color just really don't have much of. And so we have policies and practices like the GI Bill, for example, where after the war, veterans were able to get $4 billion worth of funding that went to 9 million vets, that really helped them to go to school, get low interest mortgage rates, and Black people were not allowed to participate in that. And so we have redlining, for example, that was done with the Federal Administration Office, where they had maps that pretty much mapped out areas that was deemed risky, which was basically the areas where BIPOCs live. And so if homeownership is the mechanism to be able to build wealth, they basically took these opportunities away from these communities. And it really allowed us to really just be really behind the line and being able to be able to have wealth. And so if we look at what we're having today, we have, even after all this, discrimination practices were outlawed, racist things are still happening. Discrimination, stereotype, biases is still happening. We have real estate agents that's keeping Black and white families segregated. We have loan officers that's providing subprime loans to Black families, even if they have good credit, which pretty much led to the housing crash, which also led to millions of Black people losing the little wealth that they did have. And now today, we still have unemployment rates that are high. People of color are more likely to not own a home, have lower income. And so even if we impact these things, though, I will say that it will only impact the gap very little, because white families have centuries of building wealth through land and home ownership that we have to catch up to. So it's not going to happen overnight. It is definitely going to have to be a collective effort. We have much work to do in this space, much work.
Absolutely. And I know you're highlighting some of the things that you've been able to discover in your research. I would love for you to, highlight the importance of, having a seat at the table in the workplace, so that we can start to balance out some of these inequalities, especially when it comes to, pay equity amongst BIPOC people, and especially women of color. Can you speak a little bit about the mission of Prosperity Now, and if you've been able to see, especially now during COVID, if things have gotten better or worse, just to give us a peek through the lens that you're able to see through the work that you're doing?
Oh, you just asked like 6 questions. Let me see.
Take your time, dive as deep as you want. You can tell a dream you had last night. Tell us what's on your mind. I just want you to go.
I'm gonna try to touch on all of it. I would say, just starting from the top, I would say, so Prosperity Now, we're a national intermediary where we believe in an economy where everybody is able to fully thrive and to really be able to engage and participate in an economy that doesn't have structural inequality or racism, right, as barriers. We do this by partnering with local nonprofits and organizations through technical assistance, capacity building, field building. We do research, provide strategies around local policies, state policies, advocacy efforts to be able to advance financial security for low income to moderate income families. The racial wealth divide team that I'm on, we came to be in 2015 as a way to directly impact the racial wealth divide. We're pretty much communities in color. So we work with nonprofits that's on the ground who we believe are truly positioned to know what their community need, because more than likely they come from the community. And we also know that there's disinvestments in all levels. There's disinvestments not only in the communities, but there's disinvestments with these nonprofits. There's disinvestment with the institutions. And so we do a lot of work in really trying to drive more income into these institutions so that they can do the work that they're doing. We also work to really try to give them access to additional resources. So that's like where the leadership building and capacity building come in to really move forward the work that we're doing. Connecting that a little bit to what you were asking me about, the pandemic, is things worse? Yes. It's funny, but it's not funny. But I would say my work has definitely picked up a lot of traction. It's getting a lot more attention right now because of the pandemic. And people say, so what are you doing differently? We ain't doing nothing differently. We just doubling down. We've been talking this. We've been saying this thing. We've been trying to get y'all to listen to us. Like our families, they're struggling, right? And so this pandemic just really made things just 10 times worse for individuals, for families, for small businesses that's owned by Black and Brown entrepreneurs. Like it just really just took it out the park for our communities, right? With the added layer of just the health disparities too. And economy and the economics and the health are closely linked. So we are definitely not in a better place. If anything, I feel like, this is just getting more attention. The great part about the pandemic is that it did force private, public institutions to give more funding to these communities for folks to be able to help weather the storm. It did also increase funding to nonprofits, especially those that's led by people of color. The challenging part that where we're at now, given that we are moving into a post-COVID area where things are starting to open back up, people are not giving all that money no more. It's getting dried up. It's not being sustainable. And that's a problem because people, like I said, people had these problems going into COVID. And so they need even more funding right now to even get to where they was to be like just sustainable, prior to the pandemic. And so, there's been a lot of pledges out here from companies saying, they're gonna prioritize this and all this good stuff. We need more action. We need more action. We need people to sustain the level of funding that they were giving, not because it felt good in the moment, but because it's what's necessary.
Right. And to practice what they preach, right? I love that you're highlighting action because I did a series on after the wave of police brutality killings last year in the States in the middle of the pandemic. I did a series on the Black narrative, the Black experience, and so folks can just understand, like, there is no button to end racism. It takes work. It takes consistent work. It takes consistent action. And one of the topics that we spoke about was, okay, Black is trending now, what? And how do we get past the fact that, okay, this is trending now because your eyes are on it. And, people want to be involved in, 1 second or, the hot moment that it's on. And then they move on to the next hot topic. And so how, in your opinion, how can we get people to really stick with, taking action? It's a marathon. How can we get people to really focus on, continuous action instead of just like, oh, this is trending, let me be involved now, and then disregard you in the next moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I would say is, for those of us who are in this work, and for those of us who understand that it won't happen overnight, we understand that we need to bring more people inside the inner group, right? Because a lot of times I feel like we're preaching to the same people. We're preaching to the people who already know this. So how can we expand just the collective energy? Like the energy that came out for the protests around Black Lives Matter, we need that energy and we need it sustained, right? We need people to be brought in. But I will also say people will stay more engaged if you give them a way to engage. sometimes we have allies out here who want to do something they don't know what to do, right? So I would say definitely let's create some ways for people to stay engaged once you get them. Like we might have to do a little bit more work, which sucks, but we might have to. um, and really try to give them some leadership in this so that they can continue. Like the more leaders we create in the space, they're going to expand and bring more people in. People are more prone to stay involved if they actually feel some ownership in the work that we're doing, you know. And so, you know, for our allies out there, because it was a beautiful scene, seeing just more people across ethnicities, across races really coming in. We need that continued support because it's a long haul. You're right, and it's not going to be a quick fix. And people need to also see how these things impact them too.
And that's a great segue into this next question that I have that I would love to reflect on. What kind of support is actually more harmful than helpful, if any?
Yeah, that's a good question too. There's definitely support that's harmful. First, let me just say that. Um, Having allies, I would say, like, I feel like it does better if I can give an example. Gentrification, that's something that's happening everywhere, right? Um, and we're seeing a lot of people that are being displaced as a result of gentrification. It's something, and just for those who don't know, gentrification is pretty much community developments going into communities to just invest into the economy, right? And so if you connect it back though to just historically what has been happening in these communities, there have not been investment in it, and it has really left them vulnerable for things like displacement. And so while I would say low income communities, it's not like they don't want these things. They want better jobs, they want better roads, they want more quality school systems, more quality healthcare. It's like, who would not want these things, right? But there's a ripple effect when you do not center the community in this process and when they're not really authentically engaged in how those resources are really going to impact them. So they should be able to be first in line for these new jobs. They should not be cost burdened because of high rental costs and other living expenses going up. Like, don't say things are for the community, but you're basically creating an economy that they can't afford to live in, right? And so that is like one of the examples where I would say, you know, gentrification is widespread right now, and it's because they're not centering the community and how they're doing this community development, and they're not ensuring that there's policies and practices in place to make sure that the community actually benefits and they get what they want, not what the developers want.
I love that. And so just so you know, we've got about 10 minutes left. I told you that time would
Oh,
fly, but
wow, that went fast.
I want to take this to the context of, I mean, let's go deep, let's go even deeper a little bit here. Because I love speaking about this whenever I can so that we have our antennas up and we're more aware and more responsible. So I spoke with a woman from Kenya the other day about the topic of our conversation is artificial intelligence discriminatory? Short answer is yes. I encourage people to do research. So essentially, and she said it perfectly, and I've been thinking of this as well, the digital and technological space is being colonized. So it's another form of colonization. Why? Because we don't have inclusive teams building products. We don't have people practicing emotional intelligence. We don't have a diverse perspective on how we can, essentially create new spaces in the digital space. And so my question to you would be what can we do to ensure that we're being responsible in the way we use technology and the way that we create technology so that we don't run into another, colonization, except in a digital space?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say, you got me thinking about one of my, some of our partners in Dallas that's actually working in this space around creating technology, access to technology and access to Wi-Fi for communities of color. Um, And what it makes me think about, and thinking about what you just mentioned, is that we as Black and Brown um, communities, we need to figure out a way for us to actually own some of the stuff that's out here. We need to be not necessarily at those tables, we need to create our own tables. When it comes to a lot of these things, the reason why we're really struggling to even be at those tables, even being able to not be left behind, is because we're not owning any of this, you know? And we have a lot of smart people in our communities. We have a lot of youth that is out here in technology. We need to figure out ways for them to literally create our own. We need to create our own. Like, I'm a real hard believer in order for this really to shift, ownership is necessary. We need to shift those power dynamics. We need more Black and Brown people that sit in policy seats, that can really help impact some of the policies around even allowing some of that stuff to happen. We need investments. And we need investments, I will say, from public privates. Like, how I want it so much. I want us to just be able to do it ourselves, but we will need some help. We will. And that's why it's important for us to have some narratives around just folks understand that it's just make business sense. It does. It makes business sense for our businesses to play a better role in all of this. And so those are some of the elements I believe that really help, that will help contribute to shifting that narrative, especially knowing, like, with this pandemic, everything has been digital. There's a lot more digital things. I've come across a lot of AI, investments and stuff like that. Like, we see it happening. We need to not sit on our butts and we need to be aggressive and really make sure that we are reflected in that sector, because we know it's about to take over.
Absolutely. And then speaking to our allies out there, folks who don't identify as being a part of the BIPOC community, this is really an opportunity to practice what you preach. If you want some balance, if you want some justice, support underserved, underheard voices, and I don't want to, Amazon is a whole nother topic. We don't have time to go in that deep. But, they're definitely contributing to gentrification. Lots of things are going on. Support some, BIPOC private owned businesses and see how that can help bring some balance into the question. I have a question here that was submitted live. I'm just going to read this out for us here. I'm finding the majority of tech companies do not have any representation. So what do you do when you're always the only one?
Good question. So it makes me think, it's actually making me think about, so prior to Prosperity Now, I was at Kellogg Foundation as a funder. And I remember going on a tour. This was actually in Detroit, Michigan. And they were taking us to, these tech companies where they were training all these people on technology, and, it's supposed to be going back into Detroit. So I'm walking through and I'm noticing that all the students, not one person is Black, not even Latino, like just all white people. And, what we need is people to do what I did, which was I asked them the hard question. I put them on the spot and I said, well, this all looks good and dandy, but I don't see no diversity in here. And I know that there's Black kids around here because you're in downtown Detroit. So if this is supposed to be about the community, where is the community? And the response I got was, oh, well, we're having a hard time recruiting. And what my response was? Who's doing your recruiting? Who's part of your team? Who's on your staff? Is your staff diversified? Because the only way you're going to have a diversified recruitment strategies is if you have that voice internally. No. I said, well, maybe you should start there. And that's what I say to all technology companies. If you're saying you want to be diversified, if you're saying that you want to invest in all communities, you need to start up top and you need to diversify. And our funders out here need to not invest unless they see this reflected.
Right. Like that should be one of the pillars, like show
Yeah.
me your diverse team. And
Yeah.
and also a diverse team that is, I go back to, I'm obsessed with speaking about the importance of emotional intelligence. It's one thing to have, community, um, and to be working the same machine, the same rat race, the same, creating the same problems that got us here. You can have people that are worried about the numbers and the money and all that, and that ends up being exclusive because you're not having the time, like you mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, that it takes practice, it takes time. You have to, you can't just say, we want to do this, with great intentions, and then don't put any effort or don't take any action, and then be surprised that you can't find people, because you have a million things on your agenda. And the most important thing that you want to do, which is to diversify your team, you're not going to the neighborhoods. You're not making it accessible. You're not making sure that, no, we're not going to have this event, or we're not going to have this meeting until we are representing, like, who are we missing is the question. Who are we missing and how do we find them? So I really love your feedback on this. We've got about 3 minutes left. So I do want to make sure that you are able to reveal anything else that you've been able to find in your research and the great work that you've been doing. So feel free to just take these last couple of moments to share anything that you want to make sure that we highlight before the end of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I would just share, because I do like to end off on solutions, right? And so just thinking about solutions, and as I mentioned before, I think about this through a few lenses. I think about how can we make sure people have access to quality jobs, affordable housing, increased income, products, financial products that meet them where they are. And even within all that, our institutions out here, they have a role to play in this. They literally can impact these wage gaps that we're seeing. They can impact the stereotypes and the discrimination that we're seeing around housing practices, banking practices, hiring practices. Like, we all have a role to play. And we also need some policies out here that really can help to embed that accountability that's needed, so that we get to these things, as well as just provide protection to individuals and communities that are farthest from justice. And it doesn't end with just putting a policy in place. You have to make sure that stuff is implemented right. Right. So I just want to end on saying that there's a lot of people out here who's doing this work, who have solutions. So we're not starting from scratch. We just need power, flexibility, and just the heart to do the work.
Beautifully said. Yes. Thank you, Ebony. And remind us one more time, how can we find you online after we end this conversation? Where can we go?
Yes, you can find me on Prosperity Now's website, which is prosperitynow.org. I'm also available on LinkedIn. I believe I'm on Twitter. I don't check it much, but I'm on there. Also, you can email me at ewhite, EWHITE, at prosperitynow.org. And thank you again for you, Mariella, and everyone for having me today. It's been an awesome conversation.
Yes. Thank you, Ebony. Thank you so much. And Meg, I pass the mic back to you. Thank you to all of our live callers for joining this conversation.